800 pounds of raw, wild power stands just 20 feet away. Her massive paws could crush bones with a single swipe. Her teeth could tear through flesh like paper. But as wildlife biologist Sarah Mitchell approaches the towering grizzly bear, something impossible happens. The giant creature's fierce amber eyes soften. A low, rumbling sound emerges from deep within her chest, not a growl of warning, but something else entirely. Something that defies everything we think we know about wild animals. Luna, that's what Sarah named her all those years ago, begins to move, not with the aggressive charge you'd expect from a territorial grizzly, but with careful, deliberate steps. And then, in a moment that will challenge everything you believe about the bonds between humans and nature, this massive predator does something that left everyone watching completely speechless. But before we dive into this incredible true story that spans 8 years, 2 countries, and one unbreakable bond, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications to catch more heartwarming stories like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Our story begins in the remote wilderness of northern Alaska, where the line between civilization and the wild is as thin as morning mist. Sarah Mitchell wasn't supposed to be there that October morning in 2016. As a wildlife biologist with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, her official duties rarely took her into the most dangerous corners of the Alaskan backcountry. But an urgent call had changed everything. "We've got a situation," her supervisor, David Robinson, had told her over the crackling radio. "Logging crew found something you need to see. It's not good, Sarah." The helicopter ride to the location took 45 minutes, cutting through pristine wilderness that stretched endlessly in every direction. Ancient spruce trees reached toward a sky painted in shades of steel gray, and somewhere below, a tragedy was unfolding that would change Sarah's life forever. What she found when she rappelled down into that remote valley still haunts her dreams. The massive form of a female grizzly bear lay motionless beside a fallen tree, her once magnificent coat matted with blood. But it wasn't the sight of the dead mother bear that stopped Sarah's heart. It was the tiny, desperate cries coming from the dense underbrush nearby. Hidden beneath a tangle of branches and leaves, 3 grizzly cubs huddled together, their eyes barely open, their tiny bodies shivering against the October cold. They couldn't have been more than 3 weeks old, far too young to survive on their own. In the wild, grizzly cubs stay with their mothers for up to 3 years, learning the complex skills they need to survive in one of the world's harshest environments. Sarah knelt beside the cubs, her heart breaking as she assessed their condition. 2 of them were barely breathing, their tiny bodies already shutting down from hunger and exposure. But the third, a female with distinctive golden-brown fur and the most piercing amber eyes Sarah had ever seen, was different. She was weak, certainly, but there was something in those eyes, a spark, a will to live that refused to be extinguished. "Hey there, little one," Sarah whispered, gently scooping the cub into her arms. The cub's response was a weak mewl, but she pressed her tiny body against Sarah's chest, seeking warmth and comfort. In that moment, something profound happened. A bond formed that transcended species, a connection that would prove stronger than time, distance, and every obstacle that nature could throw at them. Sarah named her Luna, after the way her golden fur seemed to catch and hold the pale autumn light. But naming an orphan grizzly cub is easy. Keeping her alive is a different story entirely. The next 6 months would test every ounce of Sarah's knowledge, dedication, and emotional strength. Luna's 2 siblings didn't survive their first night in captivity, despite Sarah's desperate efforts to save them. But Luna, stubborn, determined Luna, clung to life with a tenacity that amazed everyone at the wildlife rehabilitation facility. Raising a grizzly cub is like trying to nurture a small tornado.
Luna required feeding every 2 hours around the clock, her appetite growing exponentially as she gained strength. Sarah essentially moved into the facility, sleeping on a cot beside Luna's enclosure, waking at all hours to prepare bottles of specialized formula that mimicked bear milk's high-fat content. But the physical demands were nothing compared to the emotional complexity of the situation. Sarah knew the heartbreaking truth that she tried not to think about during those long, sleepless nights, that she was falling in love with an animal she would eventually have to release back into the wild. Every moment of bonding, every sign of Luna's growing trust and affection was both a victory and a step closer to an inevitable goodbye. Luna grew rapidly, as healthy grizzly cubs do. Within 2 months, she had quadrupled in size, her baby fluff giving way to the thicker coat that would protect her through harsh Alaskan winters. Her personality emerged too, playful but intelligent, curious about everything around her, and absolutely devoted to Sarah. "She follows you around like a dog," observed Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the facility's lead veterinarian. "I've never seen anything like it. It's like she thinks you're her mother." And in many ways, Sarah was. She taught Luna how to forage, hiding treats around the enclosure to develop her natural hunting instincts. She watched proudly as Luna learned to catch salmon in the facility's artificial stream, her powerful paws becoming more coordinated with each attempt. Most importantly, Sarah gradually reduced her direct contact with Luna, allowing the young bear to develop the healthy fear of humans that would be essential for her survival in the wild. It was the hardest thing Sarah had ever done, watching Luna's confusion and distress as the woman who had raised her from near death began to withdraw. But Sarah knew that every moment of Luna's sadness was an investment in her future freedom. The day of Luna's release arrived in late spring, when she was 18 months old and weighed nearly 200 pounds. The location was carefully chosen, a remote area of Katmai National Park, hundreds of miles from any human settlement, where Luna could live the life nature intended her to live. Sarah watched from a distance as the transport crate opened and Luna emerged into her new home. The young bear looked around uncertainly for a moment, then turned back toward the crate, toward Sarah, with an expression that seemed to ask, "Aren't you coming with me?" Sarah's heart shattered as she watched Luna disappear into the Alaskan wilderness, but she knew she had done the right thing. Luna was wild now, free to live as bears are meant to live. Sarah told herself that was enough, that their story was complete. She was wrong. For the next 8 years, Sarah carried Luna with her everywhere she went. Not physically, of course, but in her heart, in her dreams, in quiet moments when she wondered whether the bear she had raised was still alive out there in the vast Alaskan wilderness. Life moved forward, as it always does. Sarah's career flourished. She published groundbreaking research on bear behavior, became a respected voice in wildlife conservation, and helped establish new protocols for orphaned bear rehabilitation. She moved to a new position with the National Park Service, taking on greater responsibilities and traveling across the country to lecture and consult. But Luna was always there, a golden thread running through the fabric of Sarah's life. She kept Luna's baby photos on her desk, told her story to anyone who would listen, and secretly hoped that someday, somehow, their paths might cross again. The years in between were filled with their own adventures and heartaches. Sarah married fellow biologist Robert Chen in 2019, a wonderful man who understood her passion for wildlife and supported her conservation work. They bought a small cabin near Denali National Park, a place where Sarah could decompress from the demands of her career and reconnect with the wilderness that had always been her sanctuary. But even in her happiest moments, Sarah found herself scanning tree lines and distant valleys, hoping for a glimpse of golden brown fur, for some sign that Luna was not just surviving, but thriving in the wild.
The closest she came to news of Luna was through occasional reports from park rangers and researchers. A large female grizzly with distinctive markings had been spotted in the Katmai region several times over the years. She appeared healthy and had been observed with cubs of her own, suggesting successful adaptation to wildlife. Sarah wanted to believe it was Luna, but she knew better than to assume. Alaska is home to thousands of grizzly bears, and wishful thinking could easily transform any sighting into the reunion she longed for. In 2022, Sarah's work took an unexpected turn. The Canadian government, working in partnership with U.S. agencies, launched an ambitious new research project studying grizzly bear migration patterns and population genetics across the Alaska-Canada border region. Sarah was chosen to lead the American portion of the study, a career-defining opportunity that would require extensive fieldwork in some of the most remote wilderness areas of North America. The project would bring her back to Alaska for extended periods, closer to Luna's original release site than she had been since that emotional day 8 years earlier. Sarah tried not to read too much into the coincidence, but she couldn't help feeling that something was calling her back to those ancient forests and pristine valleys where her life had been forever changed. The morning of September 15, 2024 dawned clear and crisp in the remote reaches of Katmai National Park. Sarah and her research team had been in the field for 3 weeks, collecting DNA samples and behavioral data as part of their comprehensive bear population study. It was demanding work, long days hiking through difficult terrain, nights spent in basic camps, and the constant awareness that they were visitors in a landscape dominated by some of North America's most powerful predators. Sarah's research partner for this expedition was Dr. Michael Harrison, a Canadian biologist with 20 years of experience studying large carnivores. Michael was practical, methodical, and refreshingly free of the romantic notions about wildlife that sometimes clouded the judgment of less experienced researchers. "Sarah, you've been distracted all morning," Michael observed as they made their way through a dense stand of birch trees. "Everything okay?" Sarah paused, realizing that he was right. Something felt different about this place, though she couldn't put her finger on what it was. The forest seemed more alive somehow, charged with an energy that made her skin tingle and her senses hyper-alert. "I don't know. Call it intuition, but I feel like we're being watched." Michael chuckled. "In bear country, we're always being watched. That's what keeps us alive out here." But Sarah's feeling persisted as they continued their survey work. Every few minutes, she found herself pausing to scan the surrounding forest, convinced that eyes were tracking their movements. Her hand drifted unconsciously to the bear spray on her belt, not out of fear, but from an instinctive sense that something significant was about to happen. They had been working for about 2 hours when they reached a small clearing beside a stream that ran crystal clear over smooth riverstones. It was the kind of place that seemed designed for rest and reflection, a natural cathedral where shafts of sunlight filtered through the canopy to illuminate patches of moss and wildflowers. "Good spot for lunch," Michael suggested, dropping his pack and pulling out a water bottle. Sarah was about to agree when she heard it, a sound that made her blood freeze in her veins. It was a low rumbling noise, deeper than a growl, but not quite a roar. The sound a bear makes when it's trying to communicate something complex, something that goes beyond simple territorial warning or aggressive threat. "Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "don't move." Across the clearing, perhaps 60 feet away, the forest was moving. Branches swayed without wind, and then suddenly, massively, a fully grown grizzly bear emerged from the tree line. Sarah's first instinct was professional assessment. Female, approximately 8 years old based on size and build, healthy weight suggesting successful foraging, no visible cubs nearby. But as her eyes met those of the bear, every analytical thought evaporated from her mind. Those eyes. Amber gold, flecked with darker brown, holding an intelligence and awareness that seemed almost human in its intensity. Eyes she had looked into every day for 18 months. Eyes that had watched her with trust and love during the most challenging period of her career. "Luna," the word escaped her lips as barely more than a whisper, but somehow it carried across the clearing with perfect clarity. The bear's reaction was immediate and stunning.
Her massive head tilted slightly, and that rumbling sound came again, but different now, softer, almost questioning. She took a step forward, then another, her movements careful and deliberate. Michael grabbed her arm. "Sarah, what are you doing? We need to back away slowly." But Sarah couldn't move. 8 years of wondering, 8 years of hoping, 8 years of carrying Luna in her heart had led to this impossible moment. The bear approaching them wasn't just any grizzly. She was family, returning home after a long journey. "It's her," she breathed. "Michael, it's really her." What happened next defied everything that wildlife biologists are taught about human-bear interactions. Luna continued her approach, but not with the aggressive posture of a territorial bear or the nervous caution of an animal protecting cubs. She moved with purpose, with recognition, with something that could only be described as joy. 20 feet. 15. 10. "Michael, this is insane," whispered Michael, his voice tight with fear. "Even if this is your bear, she's wild now. She's been wild for 8 years. You need to back away." But Sarah stood frozen, every scientific protocol she had ever learned warring with an emotional certainty that ran deeper than training or experience. This was Luna, her Luna. The tiny orphaned cub she had raised from near death was now a magnificent wild creature. But the connection between them had somehow survived years of separation and thousands of miles. At 5 feet away, Luna stopped. She was enormous, probably close to 400 pounds of solid muscle and bone. Her claws were 6 inches long, her teeth capable of crushing skulls with ease. By every measure of logic and science, Sarah should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a peace deeper than anything she had experienced in 8 years. "Hey, beautiful girl," she said softly, using the same gentle tone she had used during those long nights at the rehabilitation facility. "Look how big you've grown." Luna's response was the sound that had started it all, that deep, rumbling vocalization that was neither growl nor roar, but something uniquely her own. A greeting, a recognition, an expression of joy that transcended species barriers. And then, in a moment that Michael later swore gave him nightmares for months, Luna closed the final distance between them and gently pressed her massive head against Sarah's chest. The embrace lasted perhaps 10 seconds, though Sarah later said it felt like hours. She could feel Luna's warmth through her thick fur, could smell the wild scents of forest and salmon and freedom that clung to her coat. Most incredibly, she could feel the rumbling of Luna's contentment, a vibration that seemed to resonate in her very bones. "I missed you too, girl," she whispered, her voice thick with tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I missed you every single day." Luna pulled back slightly, her intelligent eyes studying Sarah's face as if memorizing every detail. Then, in a gesture that seemed almost human in its tenderness, she gently licked Sarah's cheek, just once, soft as a whisper, before stepping back. The spell was broken gradually. Luna looked around the clearing, suddenly seeming to remember where she was and what she was. The wild bear reasserted itself over the rescued cub, and she took several steps backward, her posture shifting to something more typical of a cautious grizzly encountering humans. But her eyes never left Sarah's face, and that rumbling vocalization continued, softer now, but unmistakably affectionate.
"Go on, girl," Sarah said gently. "Go be wild. Go be free. But know that you'll always have a piece of my heart." As if she understood, Luna turned and began walking back toward the forest. But at the edge of the clearing, she stopped and looked back one more time. Sarah could have sworn she saw gratitude in those amber eyes, along with something else. A promise, perhaps, or simply an acknowledgement that some bonds can never truly be broken. Then Luna disappeared into the forest, leaving only swaying branches and the lingering sense of magic in the air. Michael Harrison, to his credit, didn't report the incident to park authorities. As a scientist, he knew that what he had witnessed challenged fundamental assumptions about wildlife behavior and human-animal relationships. As a friend, he understood that some experiences are too precious and fragile to survive official scrutiny. "I still don't believe what I saw," he told Sarah as they made camp that night. "Everything I know about bear behavior says that what happened today was impossible." Sarah stared into their small campfire, still processing the emotional intensity of the reunion. "Maybe that's the problem with everything we think we know," she said quietly. "Maybe we've been so focused on studying animals as specimens that we've forgotten they're individuals with memories and emotions and the capacity for relationships that go deeper than simple conditioning." The encounter with Luna forced Sarah to re-examine many of her assumptions about wildlife rehabilitation and the bonds that can form between humans and the animals they rescue. Traditional wisdom holds that wild animals should be kept as wild as possible, with minimal human contact to ensure successful reintegration into natural habitats. But Luna's recognition after 8 years suggested that some connections transcend typical behavioral patterns. More importantly, the reunion highlighted the profound impact that early care relationships can have on an animal's development. Luna hadn't just survived her release into the wild, she had thrived, establishing territory, apparently raising cubs of her own, and becoming a successful member of the ecosystem she had been born into. Yet she had also retained some essential memory of the human who had saved her life, caring for her during the most vulnerable period of her existence. The love and security Sarah had provided during those crucial first months hadn't made Luna dependent or less capable of wildness. Instead, it seemed to have given her the foundation she needed to become fully, magnificently wild. Word of the reunion inevitably spread through the wildlife biology community, though Sarah was careful to share the story only with colleagues she trusted to understand its significance. The response was mixed. Some dismissed it as a coincidental encounter with a habituated bear, while others recognized it as evidence of cognitive and emotional capabilities in bears that science was only beginning to understand. Dr. Rebecca Taylor, a leading expert in animal cognition at the University of Alaska, was fascinated by Sarah's account. "What you've described aligns with emerging research on long-term memory and emotional attachment in large mammals," she explained during a phone conversation weeks after the encounter. "We're discovering that many species previously thought to have simple cognitive patterns actually demonstrate complex social memories and emotional intelligence." The reunion also supported growing evidence that the mother-infant bond in bears is more sophisticated than previously understood. Grizzly cubs learn not just practical survival skills from their mothers, but also social behaviors, communication patterns, and even individual recognition abilities that can persist long after separation. Sarah began incorporating these insights into her research.
focusing more attention on the emotional and cognitive lives of the bears she studied. Her work took on new depth and nuance, informed by the understanding that each animal was not just a data point, but an individual with their own history, personality, and capacity for relationship.
Luna's story offers hope in a time when environmental news can feel relentlessly discouraging. Climate change, habitat destruction, and species extinction dominate headlines, making it easy to feel powerless in the face of such enormous challenges. But Luna reminds us that individual actions matter, that love and care invested in a single life can have impacts that ripple outward in ways we might never fully understand. The tiny, nearly dead cub that Sarah rescued from that October forest became not just a magnificent wild bear, but an ambassador for her species, a bridge between human and natural worlds, and an inspiration for new approaches to wildlife conservation that honored both the wildness of animals and the deep connections possible between species. Every wildlife rehabilitator watching this video has probably experienced their own version of Luna's story. The difficult goodbye, the years of wondering, the hope that their former charges are thriving somewhere out in the wild. Sarah's reunion validates all of those experiences, confirming that the love poured into orphaned and injured animals doesn't disappear when they return to the wild, but becomes part of who they are, shaping how they move through the world and interact with both their own species and others. For those of us who aren't wildlife biologists, Luna's story offers a different but equally important message: that our relationship with nature doesn't have to be one of dominance or exploitation or even benign separation. We can be part of the natural world in ways that enhance rather than diminish its wildness, that contribute to rather than detract from the complex web of relationships that make ecosystems thrive. Every time we choose to support wildlife conservation, every time we make our yards more wildlife-friendly, every time we vote for policies that protect habitat, every time we simply pause to appreciate the wild creatures sharing our world, we're continuing Luna's story. We're affirming that the boundary between human and nature is permeable, that love and respect can flow both ways, and that individual acts of care can contribute to healing our fractured relationship with the natural world. The grizzly bears of Alaska need our protection now more than ever. Climate change is altering their habitat, human development is fragmenting their territory, and conflicts between bears and people continued to result in unnecessary deaths on both sides. But Luna proves that coexistence is possible, that mutual respect and understanding can replace fear and aggression, and that the future of both humans and bears depends on our ability to see each other, not as threats, but as fellow travelers sharing the same precious planet. If you've been moved by Luna's story, there are concrete ways to help ensure that other orphaned cubs get the chance to grow up wild and free. Support your local wildlife rehabilitation centers, donate to organizations working to protect bear habitat, and advocate for policies that prioritize coexistence over conflict. Most importantly, share stories like Luna's, stories that remind us of the magic that's still possible when we approach the natural world with love, respect, and wonder. Because somewhere out there in the vast Alaskan wilderness, a golden brown grizzly bear is teaching her cubs how to catch salmon, how to find the best berry patches, and how to navigate the complex social world of wild bears. She carries with her the memory of a human woman who once saved her life, and that memory has made her not less wild, but more complete. Luna's story continues every day. In every sunset she watches from some remote mountaintop, in every lesson she passes on to her cubs, in every moment she chooses curiosity over fear when encountering the strange, upright creatures who sometimes venture into her domain. That's the true magic of Luna's story. It never really ends. It continues in every act of compassion between species, every moment of wonder in the presence of wild beauty, and every choice to see ourselves not as separate from nature, but as part of it. Luna's reunion with Sarah lasted only minutes, but its impact will ripple forward through generations. A reminder that love, once given freely, never truly dies. So the next time you see a wild creature, whether it's a bear in Alaska, a deer in your backyard, or a bird outside your window, remember Luna. Remember that behind those eyes is an individual with their own story, their own relationships, their own capacity for memory and emotion and love. Remember that you have the power to be part of their story in ways that honor their wildness while acknowledging the deep connections that bind all life together. That's Luna's gift to us. The knowledge that we're not alone in this world, that the boundaries we draw between ourselves and nature are largely artificial, and that love, properly given, makes everything it touches more beautiful, more wild, and more alive. And if you found yourself holding your breath during Luna and Sarah's reunion, if you felt tears welling up when that massive bear pressed her head against the chest of the woman who saved her life, then you understand something profound about what it means to be human in a world full of other beings deserving of our respect, our protection, and our love. Luna's story is our story too, a reminder that in saving the wild creatures of this world, we save something wild and essential in ourselves. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories that celebrate the amazing connections between humans and the natural world. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment of magic, and let us know in the comments, what wild animal encounter has stayed with you? What story of connection between humans and nature has touched your heart? Until next time, keep believing in the magic that's still possible when we approach the world with open hearts and endless wonder. The wild is calling, and sometimes, if we're very lucky, it remembers our names.